Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we'll be doing something a little bit different. We will not be previewing any particular deck, but we will be talking about the cards that I think could use with a nerf for the upcoming patch. The patch notes, I think, will be released on Tuesday, so this will be coming out, obviously, now you're watching it, and there will be a video as well on Monday about cards that I think could use a buff as well, which I think is always much more exciting to talk about cards that could be buffed, because, you know, essentially, you know, if a card gets a big buff from going unplayable to like pretty good, you know, you're essentially getting new cards into the game, and it's kind of really exciting in a lot of different ways. So I'll be doing that on Monday, so you know, if you're interested in that, be sure to check that out. But today we're going to talk about nerfs, and obviously last time we saw the Lee Sin and Make It Rain nerf, two changes that I think made a pretty big impact, despite people saying that, you know, it definitely wouldn't, and the Lee Sin nerf, you know, it wasn't even a nerf, like, it wasn't even a nerf. Why didn't it nerf Lee Sin? Well, they did. So, you know, spare me those comments for whatever comes out on Tuesday this time. And yeah, we're going to go through the cards that I think need to be nerfed, and cards that I think should be on kind of more of a watch list. We'll quickly go over them as well, and you know, by all means, you know, leave your comments about, you know, cards that you think should be nerfed. If I've missed any, it's very likely that I might have. To do this process, to be honest with you, I just looked at the top decks on Mobalytics, sort of went through every top deck and thought, okay, you know, what's the most problematic cards in these decks, blah, 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 and kind of, you know, just worked my way through it, therefore. So we're going to start off with some of the cards that I think could definitely use with a nerf. So first up is your boy Trundle. And Trundle, of course, I think I'd be shocked if Trundle wasn't nerfed. I'm pretty sure they alluded to it before, so I'd definitely be expecting this as a nerf. And how can we nerf Trundle, right? Because I don't need to tell you that, you know, Trundle War Mothers or Trundle Feel the Rush has been, you know, the dominant deck of this meta. And so I'd be, you know, as I mentioned, shocked if they didn't change Trundle, who I think is the key linchpin to that deck, and anyone who's played with or, you know, against that deck knows that turn 5 or even turn 4, if they ramp into Trundle, is the most important turn in the game. And you know, if they have Trundle, I'd be actually really interested to know decks that, you know, that deck with Trundle on turn 4 versus that deck without Trundle turn 4 or 5, the win percentage chances. I bet there is a monumental swing for that. I bet it is crazy how big that difference is, and it's because Trundle's so strong, right? And I think that the real reason why Trundle's so strong is obviously a combination of this word here with this number here just makes it so difficult to remove him really at all. You know, you often will have to use multiple cards to try and get rid of Trundle, you know, by turn 5, and then, you know, once you're past like turn, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, when things start, you know, sort of catching up to Trundle in terms of power level, of course, then he's leveling up, and you've also got Ice Pillow, which is then, you know, getting rid of your biggest threat. So you need 2 threats that are as big as Trundle, which often, you know, you won't have. So that's why Trundle is obviously becoming so powerful. So how can we change Trundle? Well, I think one way, of course, is to reduce this big number 6 down to 5, where there would be more options. You know, you think you play out in your head, you know, say they, you know, play Trundle turn 5, well, you know, you play Swiftwing Lancer, all of a sudden you challenge it, you know, and then maybe you can make a fair trade with Trundle. You know, you think, okay, well, they play turn 5, you know, you're in an aggro deck, let's say Scouts, right? Oh, you play maybe the Moose, right? That's got 5 attack. Now you can attack with that twice, and they can't block it with the Trundle unless they want to trade it. Whereas before, of course, you know, that sort of trade arrangement, you're just not getting the better of that trade, really, are you? You're attacking once, they'll block, and then you'll attack again, and they'll just, you know, block with something else, and you will have lost your moves for pretty much nothing. And that's where I think, you know, changing this to a 5/5 would actually be a big difference, because, you know, there is a lot of 5-drops with 5 attack. You know, that's it's expected of a 5-drop that it would probably have 5 attack. So therefore, you know, doing that with Trundle probably helps you out quite a bit in terms of being able to trade with Trundle favorably. with that said, there is, of course, some other options. You could increase Trundle's mana cost. I highly doubt, again, that they would redesign Trundle. I don't think Trundle needs a redesign at all. I think he's, I kind of like him. He's different. The Ice Pillar is pretty cool. So I don't think they'd redesign Trundle. But you could increase his mana cost. And again, I think that would probably be a bigger nerf, even if you increased his stats to a 5/7, a 6/6, whatever you want to make it. Just because obviously he fits well within ramp decks, and if you have to wait that extra turn to get him, even if you ramp, that could make the difference, in a lot of, say, aggro matchups or even mid-range matchups. I think if making Trundle be one turn later will always probably feel a bit awkward. And, we've seen it with Lee Sin, with Karma. Even if you think 1 mana isn't going to make a difference for these champions, it really, really does. A 1 mana difference, you cannot underestimate how big it is. You might just think, oh, it's only one number, it's one turn, it's like whatever. Well, that one turn often you'll find is the difference between winning and losing a game. And so expect Trundle to be nerfed, and yeah, I think it should be pretty exciting to see where the meta goes from there, because it feels like every time it's like, oh, Lee Sin goes, where are we going to end up now? Okay, oh, Feel the Rush came out. Oh, well, this deck's really good now. Oh, well, Trundle's now nerfed, so take this one down. Oh, where are we going now? Oh, now it's aggro, but that means that Shadow Isle's control is good again. And but I love these little balance patch changes every time, like just to because it's like you just get that feel of rush of like day 1 or 2 of it. No one knows what's good. You can kind of be like, oh, this is probably good, but no one really knows. And so, yeah, it'll be really exciting, again, to see where they go. Please nerf Trundle. If Trundle goes untouched, I'm going to be really, really disappointed. But I think there is almost a 0% chance of that happening. So, on to the next card. My next card, it might surprise you somewhat, but I really do think that Jagged Butcher could use with a bit of a change. Obviously, again, I mean, it's not a shocking card, right? This is a card that's seen a lot of play. It's a very strong card. A lot of people might argue it's, not a main culprit itself and is not worthy of a nerf. But I was thinking about, sort of pirate aggro or bilge war, any sort of bilge war aggro deck. And Butcher is just such a strong linchpin of that deck. And if you take Butcher away, it does limit their options somewhat. And I'm not saying you have to take Butcher away completely, because I really like my idea for changing Butcher. I think it's a really neat idea. Because I think Butcher's problem is he's just universally good. You don't get Plunder, it's like, okay. You do have the option to get Plundering. You could play a 1 mana 3/3. The tempo is really, really strong. If you're in the early turns, that's such a big a swing potentially. And if you've got like double Butcher on like turn 2, if you've managed to plunder, it's game over most of the time. Like, most decks just won't be able to keep up with that kind of tempo. They just won't. And so I think, it's possible that to help, because I was looking at that deck and I was like, there's no one card that feels like crazy strong on its own, but as a deck it just functions very well. So I was thinking, okay, well, what if we hit Butcher with it? And here's my idea, if you will, for redesigning Butcher. I would make Butcher a 1 mana 2/1. Obviously a pretty sizable nerf, right? And you might think, oh, that would kill the card, Chris, what are you doing? That would be really bad. Hear me out. I would also change Butcher's Plunder effect to grant me +2/+2, so that when you get Plunder, you get a 4/3. What does this do? Well, it changes Butcher from a, sort of overall just good card. Doesn't matter, unless it's like turn 10 or whatever, but early game, just a good card, doesn't really matter, to all of a sudden now it's a high synergy card. If you can get, if you can go Warning Shot Butcher turn 1, you can potentially deal 5 damage turn 1. But if you don't, you've just got a 2/1. So it becomes a very high synergy card that you need to incorporate in the right deck. Think like a Turbo Sejuani deck. It would fit really well there where you're activating Plunder all the time. But in, normal generic Bilge Water aggro, maybe not so much. And that, I think, would be a really impactful change. I'm sure a lot of people would be scared of a 1 mana 4/3. What would we do? There would be nothing that could stop that. Well, there is something that could stop that. Solari Soldier, of course. If they went Warning Shot Butcher, you know, they've got the attack and you went Slurry Soldier and you stop that attack, they've just spent a whole card, you know, just getting a bit of stats, and you've managed to stop that attack, and you'd probably from there on be okay. So there is viable options to still stop Jagged Butcher that, you know, see a lot of play, like Slurry Soldier, and your 2-drop obviously would probably have 3 attack and then be able to block the Butcher, and they've wasted a card. So it's like, you'd probably feel okay, and I think that it would be such a good change and such a good way of making Butcher a high synergy card with Plunder, as opposed to just kind of an overall good card. Now we come to perhaps more of an obvious one, and that is Pale Cascade. I was somewhat surprised that they didn't nerf this one before. It seems pretty obvious, and I think it has a very obvious change to make as well. Just take this +1 away, because I think it's just such a neat change. It just, you know, it nerfs the card in a relevant way. It doesn't kill the card because it still says draw 1. If you took away this draw 1, obviously, excuse me, that would kill the card. But because, you know, it still would say draw 1, it would still give the 2 attack. It still synergizes really well with Diana, which is obviously something they would want to keep around. Because Diana has quick attack, you know, the health part of this doesn't matter as much for something like someone like Diana. And you can still draw a card. So it still keeps everything that's good about Diana, and works with Diana, and still works with, you know, a sort of Nightfall aggro deck. Still works very well within that realm where you want to be probably increasing attack so that you can, you know, hit them for as much as you can. But it wouldn't be played everywhere, and that's essentially what I think we want. You know, you don't want decks with Aurelion Sol playing Pale Cascade, because it just shouldn't be sort of a universal card that fits everywhere. You know, personally, I prefer high synergy decks. I think most people probably do, especially with Runeterra, and obviously the whole idea is that with champions, you know, you can build high synergy decks around them. Whereas Pale Cascade is sort of, well, this is just a good card, and that's kind of the main theme, I think, is sort of trying to eliminate these cards that are just, well, this is just a good card. I know that, you know, you're probably going to have cards that are better than other cards, and that's somewhat needed, but I think cards that are just universally good and played in every deck within a region, I don't think that that's a good thing. I think cards should always be on the periphery of being, you know, even the strongest cards in a region should always be like, well, I can make this deck and it doesn't work for this deck. It doesn't make any sense. And that's the way I think that they should be. So, yeah, that's Pale Cascade. Pretty simple change, I think. I would doubt anyone would have any problems with what I just said. But maybe I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong. Go for it. I dare you. So a little heads up before we start the discussion on this card here. This now, I'm moving into sort of the territory, and this is very important, listen up. I'm moving into territory now where I don't think these cards need a nerf, to be clear. I do not think these cards need a nerf. These are cards now, from now on, cards that I think could potentially one day see a nerf if, you know, certain things continued or, you know, happened to change things in the metagame, right? Just to be clear, those are the only 3 before that I think, you know, I would nerf these cards. The rest, this is watchlist territory. Okay, with that, let's proceed. Avalanche. This is one I think that a lot of people, perhaps newer to the game, would probably suggest needs a nerf. Avalanche wasn't played at all before Trundle came along. And a lot of people actually probably called for this card to be buffed once upon a time. They obviously knew Trundle was coming along, and that, you know, probably it would synergize pretty well with Trundle. So that's probably why they, you know, didn't buff the card, because of course we'd be in a lot of trouble if they did right now. But Avalanche, say Trundle got nerfed, right? In a world where they did nerf Trundle, but the deck still, you know, performed really well. I think Avalanche there, you know, could be in for a nerf. You know, let's say they nerfed Trundle, even if he became like 6 mana, but the deck was still definitely the top deck in the meta, then I think we would probably start looking at cards like Avalanche and wondering, maybe this is a bit too strong. But for now, I think personally it's fine. You know, I think Avalanche is a weird one where normally, like, when a certain deck is at the top, most other decks start to react a lot, but I've seen a lot of aggro decks they actually don't react. They haven't really reacted that well to Avalanche. You know, I was thinking like you could play stuff like Crimson Disciple, or even stuff like Boom Crew Rookie. Like this is big. These are big counters to that kind of deck. Like Boom Crew Rookie, they don't play anything on turn 2. You know, they play Whirling Stones on turn 3. You can get 2 attacks with Boom Crew Rookie, potentially even 3. And Avalanche won't kill it either. So normally you do get that kind of like reaction, but this time I haven't seen it as much. So I don't think Avalanche is really that problematic of a card on its own. Obviously the deck that it's played in is just very strong. But as I say, if that deck continued to dominate, we could see an Avalanche nerf. But as I say, right now, probably not. Similar situation and scenario I think exists for Wording Stones, where I'm pretty sure this card used to be 2 mana at the like very, very, very start, maybe even pre-open beta of this game. I'm pretty sure I've heard people refer to that. And again, another card that people thought was a pretty useless card. But then I think, you know, a lot of cards I think exist. You know, if the right deck came along, they have potential. And Wording Stones is a good example of that. And again, I'd be shocked if they nerf this card, to be honest. I think it's perfectly fine where it is. I know a lot of people probably find it frustrating, but it does have counters. You know, I personally love my Farron Spider deck that runs Culling Strike, and it really does just absolutely wreck anytime they play Wording Stones turn 3. So I'd be surprised if they nerf Wording Stones. Personally, I don't think it needs to, but as I mentioned, if that deck just, you know, got nerfed a few times but still dominated, maybe then we would start looking at Wording Stones and be like, maybe we should make this 3 health. You know, maybe we should you know, look at this card a bit differently. But right now, I don't think so. So this one is a bit different though. This one I think has more problems with it, and that's Feel the Rush. Now, I don't think this card should be nerfed right now. My main issue with this card, I think, is, does this card just make War Mothers useless? And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know when you would want to play War Mothers over this card, and that is kind of the problem, I guess. And I don't know how. I mean, obviously you could make it 13 mana if you really wanted to. That would be a nerf to the card. And a pretty interesting one as well. But I don't know what to do with this card. I don't know if it needs a nerf, personally. I think my main issue with it is it just, you know, stomping over War Mothers? And, you know, War Mothers, I think, is kind of an interesting, unique card. And this has kind of come in and just said, like, hey, look, a unique idea, and I just come in and stomp it. So I don't know. I really don't know about Feel the Rush. It's an interesting card. But I think overall I'd say probably let's just keep it around as is for now, and just see where we end up. But you know, if something else ends up replacing that and uses Feel the Rush, and you know, and it continues its dominance, maybe we will start looking at Feel the Rush as a card that, you know, needs a nerf. But we shall see. Right now, it's sort of too early. I'm going to say this is too early to call anything on, if you will. So next up is Astral Protection, and it kind of falls into a similar category where right now I think not many people would say this card probably does need a nerf. However, in my head I was thinking, you know, let's say Trundle gets nerfed, and let's say, you know, for whatever reason Tom Soraka becomes, you know, the #1 deck. I think that this would be the most talked about card for many weeks until it got nerfed, if that was the case. If Tom Soraka became, you know, unequivocally the best deck in the meta, I think people would talk about Astral Protection over and over and over again until it got nerfed. And so for that reason, I'm putting it on kind of this watch list where one day I could definitely see this getting nerfed, particularly if Tom Soraka is sort of, you know, the top deck. Just because its potential, you know, to grant 8 extra health is obviously very, very strong, particularly in conjunction with Tom Kench, of course. And often, you know, is just blowout material, right? Particularly considering, and a lot of these cards as well, you have to consider the region that they're in. Obviously, Astral Protection is in the same region as Bastion, so you can run both in the same deck and, you know, sort of say to your opponent, you can't kill me through damage. oh, you want a vengeance or ruination me? Oh, that's a shame. Here's this bastion that's giving me even more stats as well. So I wouldn't be shocked one day if this card got nerfed, particularly as I mentioned, if Soraka Tahm Kench became the deck that everyone started to hate on. But for now, I think, you know, we can sort of settle for giving them a strong card within their own deck, because it is a high synergy card that doesn't really fit anywhere else. So that's probably why you don't see as many people complaining about it, at least these days. But we'll see where we end up. Maybe in, you know, a month's time or wherever we are. On a similar note, I think Star Spring is another one where if Tom Soraka did, and I'm not saying it will do, but if it ever did become, you know, top of the food chain, I think that maybe again people would say, you know, I remember very early on, you know, when the new cards came out, people were very looking at Star Spring like, whoa, this is actually very doable. Obviously, Star Spring is very easy to nerf. You would just need to, you know, change that 22 to whatever, 25, 30, whatever it may be, however, you know, easy or hard you think it is to get to. So this would be a very easy thing to nerf, but right now, I think, again, you know, we're sort of okay. Personally, I don't have any problems with Tom Soraka, so I'd be surprised if they did decide to nerf it. But again, if this did become, you know, clearly the best deck in the meta, then I think maybe people would start to be like, hey, this card needs a nerf. So that's why I'd probably say, you know, just keep your eye on Star Spring, and we'll see where we are down the line. And finally, we come to Troll Chant. Now, this one, I had to debate whether I wanted to put this on the cards that I think actually definitely need a nerf or not. I think it's close. I think we can all agree that this is probably the best combat trick in the game. Maybe I'm forgetting one off the top of my head, but, you know, it's just like a pure combat trick, like burst speed spell. For everything that it does, it pops spell shield, you know, it does so much just on its own. That this is a card I think we all know, kind of like, maybe this is a bit too good. And my problem is, how do you change this card, right? What I've got written down is to make it 3 mana and change the numbers to 3. And I think that would be a good change. In my head, it's a good change, like the extra mana. Again, you cannot understate how much, you know, 1 mana can do for a card or not. You know, look at Make It Rain, you know. Anyone who's played with Make It Rain recently knows that, like, the 3 mana cost, like, it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like you're winning the exchange most of the time. And, you know, if you look out on the RNG, it's like, okay, I got my value. And if you don't look out on the RNG of that, it's like, man, that card sucks. And I think Troll Chant obviously doesn't have the RNG value too. So, you know, probably wouldn't feel completely useless. But the difference in health, I think, often what, you know, if you change both the numbers to 3, a lot of you might be thinking, whoa, don't do that. But I think often the difference wouldn't be that much. You know, you're using this as a combat trick. You can negate 4 damage. Like, how often do you have a damage differential of 5 or 6 where changing those numbers would really, really make that big of a difference? It would probably make the most difference when, you know, you add health to one of yours and stop the attack of something that's hitting your nexus. That's probably where it would be the most impactful. But you are paying 3 mana for that now. So I think that would be a useful change. And I think the card would still be okay. I think then the debate would become, you know, whether that or Fury the North is a better combat trick, and whether Elixir of Iron is better, and it might become more situational. For certain things, you know, it'd be good with stuff like Tahm Kench, you know, to lower their attack or whatever. But I think that this one's a pretty hard card to talk about. So maybe I'd love to hear some suggestions about how you would change Troll Chant, and, you know, because I want to keep these cards still okay. I would hate to, you know, just completely kill them. Like, if you made this 4 mana and just didn't change anything about it, obviously the card's not good. But, so I'm trying to, find ways to make the cards still okay, but not, not as good as they are right now. And is that it on my list here that I'm looking at? It is it. So that's the last card. So with that said, let me know what you people think, how you would change these cards. If I miss cards, suggest changes for them. It's very likely that I have missed cards. So, don't hate me for it. Don't leave angry comments about how much you hate a card and how, they're never going to change it or whatever. As I say, stay tuned for the video about the buffs and cards that I'd like to see buffed. I think that's more exciting. And, I'd love coming up with ideas for some of them, because obviously you can go in a lot of different directions and completely redesign cards, and, it's a lot of fun. So let me know what you guys think, and I will see you next time.